Today, I am so excited to introduce this remarkable young man that I met, Payton. I had such a wonderful experience meeting him. He has this magnetism about him that I was really drawn to. I happened to be visiting my sister in law. We had a memorial service for my mother in law recently, and she was an ordained minister in the Congregational Church. And to honor her and to support my sister-in-law, we went her to the congregation there in Wells.
Yeah, in Wells.
In Wells, Maine, and it was a lovely service. Oh, I was so grateful to be there. Beautiful, wonderful pastor, and as part of the service, the pastor invited anyone who was interested in becoming a member of the congregation to meet with him after the service. And my sister in law had decided to join that congregation. And so I stayed with her to support and be there with her, and got to hear Payton and got to hear his story of what brought him to that church that day. And after the service, I slipped you my phone number and said, "Hey,
that
I
you
have
did.
a podcast about grief. Let's talk."
Right.
So we've had a couple of really neat discussions, and Payton, I'm so excited for you to share your perspective on hardship, loss, grieving, and then the kind of the ultimate message of hope that you have discovered. And you're still a pretty young man, so you've lived a lot of life in your how many years?
Almost 22. We're
Almost
there.
22. Okay, you've lived double, triple lifetimes in these 22 years, and I'm really, really excited for you to share the good, the bad, the ugly, the hopeful, all of it. So please just go ahead and start with a bio about yourself.
Yeah, well, I first want to just say I've definitely experienced all of those things that you just mentioned. I think all of us have. And I want to thank you officially on this actual platform where we're speaking for giving me this opportunity to speak about my story, to kind of, hopefully, to anybody who is listening, shed some light, give them that little spark of hope that they may need in this moment. My story heavily involves my parents. You know, this is a podcast about grief, and I lost my father when I was 14 years old. And then my mom, it's coming up on a year now. It'll be July 15th. Will be the official 1-year marker of her passing. They have obviously their own marks in who I am today. You asked who I am, a little bio about myself. My dad was he was a goofball, to say the least. He was a goofy man who, a lot of the stories I probably couldn't share, just because it's a little ridiculous. I'll give you this one story that I wasn't there to experience, but his friends kind of told me this. I think they actually said it at his funeral, and it was
So this is iconic then.
Yeah, well, it was interesting because after the friends spoke about this story, the pastor said, he went up and he was like, "Well, although it doesn't seem like Dan was a man of faith from the story that you just heard, you would see otherwise in his relationship." But my dad was a bouncer when he was growing up, and a lot of the times, like, he was up all night, he's staying up all night, and this is where he got into his addiction, right? This is kind of like that start of it. But there was one time where his friends were out and he let them in, and towards the end of the night, his friends were calling him over to, join them in
Yeah,
their hoorays and their
yeah.
parties. And they had a couple shots lined up for him. And my dad went over and he grabbed the shots. And rather than just drinking them, he ate the glasses.
No! Oh my gosh!
just uh just a little
Little over
glimpse
the
of,
top.
just to impress people. Like, he was very much that kind of guy. He wanted to make people laugh or smile, and that, I don't know how that makes, I would be worried if I saw something.
Right.
But I think a part of that has kind of gone into me. I really enjoy making people laugh as well, and I think that's always been a part of me, that kind of like witty kind of humor.
Yeah.
I enjoy that a lot. And outside of that, to give you more of the picture of who my dad was, he was a very stoic person,
Mhm.
very calm, cool, collected. And I always noticed that he was able to kind of control his emotions. At least on the surface, it looked like that.
Mhm.
In any moments of distress, whether that was my mom and him arguing, or during sporting events, if he was a coach or something like that, always very cool. Like, he
Uh-huh.
wouldn't let the emotions get to him.
Uh-huh. Okay,
That's what it
that would have
seemed
made him a
like.
good bouncer.
Yeah, right, exactly. And he was fighting. He trained karate for a long time. He was a black belt in that, so I think that kind of probably
Wow, that
helped
takes
with
a lot
that.
of discipline
A
too.
lot of discipline, and that, honestly, discipline, what you just said, is kind of the
Okay.
root of what he gave me
Right.
and what I am today. Like, if you looked at my lifestyle, it's very much creature of habit, very disciplined. I have, like, over the past 8-ish years, you look at my life and it's just kind of been me developing these habits into my life.
Yeah.
Um, and I really enjoy that about my everyday. He
Yeah.
gave that to me. Um, my mom, on the other hand, was very, very caring,
Mm.
loved people, and wanted to love people. Like, that is all she wanted. She wanted to help. She wanted to be there. She wanted to support you in however way it was, right?
Oh.
And I do want to add this because I think it's important to take notice of this. I didn't always see my parents like this.
Mhm.
This is more recent that I've been able to look at my parents and see these beautiful qualities in them. For a majority of my life, it was quite the opposite.
Right. And why is that?
I think, um, me and my friends just had a conversation about this the other day, actually. And I was kind of explaining to them that, like, Julie, I could look at you and I could say, you offer such a open and vulnerable space. Like, you give that to me right now, and that's a beautiful quality you have, right? That's one of the many qualities that you have, right? But when it came to my mom or my dad, their only quality, their only trait that I saw was addiction, was alcoholism.
Right, right.
That's
So
all they
uh,
were to me.
right.
So even if they were showing me love, even if they were showing up for me, okay, you're doing this for me now, but later on tonight, or even when you wake up first thing in the morning, you're just gonna drink, and you're going to do the things that I know aren't good for you, that you know aren't good for you. So
That are then
what?
gonna
I'm supposed
affect
to
you.
appreciate all these things you're doing for me?
Right,
No, thank you. So
right.
that's how their label was not mom and dad with a bunch of different things underneath. It was alcoholic who don't want to
Mm,
get help and won't get help because me, maybe? Is it me? And
right.
that was a majority of my life.
Right.
And I think, to bring this all back around to grief, I think that's one of the more profound things that has happened to me in the light of the darkness of their passing was that label no longer really mattered
Oh, yeah.
because it was over, right? There was no, I couldn't be mad at them for not going to rehab or not going to AA or doing the things that they maybe needed to do because, well, there was no more of that. So I couldn't be mad at that. Or I guess I chose not to be mad at that. And it kind of opened me up to this idea that, like, all these good memories were starting to pour back in. Oh, wait, they were trying to show me love how they could, but it wasn't what I wanted at that time. I didn't want them to love me. I wanted them to get better for
Right.
themselves in some way. Does that
Well,
make
I'm
sense?
sure it totally makes sense. And I'm sure that real love to you would have felt like them getting better,
Mm,
right?
mm. That's, yeah, yeah. I think that's all I wanted.
Right.
That's It's so easy to think of like so many different moments. Um, I'll share one kind of story that for a long time would always replay in my head. And this was kind of a pivotal pain point in my life. And it was before my parents got divorced, their drinking was kind of picking up. And you noticed it in the household, especially like how that was affecting everything. And there were times during my childhood where these fights would break out.
Mhm.
And the fights were not normal fights. By that, I mean, like, there was this one time specifically. I remember I was in my room, I was playing video games because that's what I like to do, is kind of a way to kind of distract myself, I think.
How old were you then?
This, I couldn't pinpoint it. Maybe 8 or 9 around
Okay.
then.
Okay.
Um, Around then, and I was playing video games, and I was always kind of like, that little kid in me was always like very bold in that he always wanted to help in some ways, even if it was frightening or scary or whatever it was. And this one fight that they were having, it was starting to erupt, and I felt it starting to boil up. So I ran outside of my room and I got in the middle of both of them. And I'm like, I'm screaming at the top of my lungs while they're screaming at each other. They can't hear me because there's 3 people screaming, and it's just so many people that are distant but want to be close and don't know how
Mm.
type of thing. So I'm screaming at them, and then, my mom, you know, my mom was my mom could be very aggressive, and that's where my dad, I always respected that he was able to kind of keep his calm in those
Mhm.
moments and not get angry. He was kind of always that person who was like, let's settle this down, while my mom was kind of getting after him.
Mhm. Escalating it.
Right. Not that they both didn't have their own sides, and it was, of course, both of them and their own issues, but so I started screaming at them, and then my dad, I remember, was this guy was a bodybuilder. He was 6'1", 240, 250 pounds. Like, his muscles, his arms were the size of my head. Like, this guy was a giant, and I'm screaming at him to stop, screaming at my mom to stop. My dad began starting to scream at me, like, to get out of it. Like, this has nothing to do with you. leave this alone, and I never wanted to leave it alone, which was my like that was my issue in this matter, I guess you could call it. So I start running outside, and I'm about to unlock the door to leave the house, and I feel this presence behind me close the door right as I open it, and he's like, "Go to your room. Like, this is not happening. You're not going anywhere." And at that time, my brother lived next door, and I just wanted to get out, right? And that was my whole idea in doing this, was just like, I need to leave this situation because I don't know what's about to happen. Prior, they'd have fights where cops would show up, and this just to me shows like where they were at as far as their disease,
Right.
struggle with the alcoholism. Like,
Right.
there was so much internally that they weren't able to express or get over or deal with, maybe because they didn't have the right tools. Maybe they just had the wrong belief systems, whatever it was, I'm not too sure. But so I run to my brother's room. I climb out the window anyway, because I was going to find my way. I was going to get out. You're not going to stop me now.
Right.
So I climb out the window and I go to my brother's home. And I just remember that night sitting there with my brother, with my nephew. He's pretty much my brother, which is an interesting story. But in looking over at my house, because there was two trailers kind of right next to each other, and just seeing like the cops showing up and all this thing. And I think that was a really pivotal moment for me, because I think that's where I lost a lot of hope. I think I lost a lot of courage, and I think I lost my voice during that time. Like, if I was to recollect when I think I lost my voice, and that's why I feel so passionately, and that's why I feel so like I want to be open about these experiences, is because I feel like I found my voice again. That, I believe, was that moment.
Right.
Because
here you are, a little boy. I mean, really, you're a little boy. You don't necessarily think of yourself as a little boy. You just yourself, right?
Right.
And you know this is a problem. You try to interject as a part of the family, and you're shut down. Like, right? Like your voice isn't needed or wanted here. It's not effective here. I can see where you would stop using your voice at that point.
It became really clear to me that the voice wasn't really something that you could trust. And that was my interpretation of that, was the voice wasn't something that you could trust. And from that idea, I saw in what they were telling me that idea was being proven right over and over. And I do want to get to grief, but I want to kind of go deeper into this, just because I think it's really important. Like, and of course, if you want to move around and.
Well, grief is born of pain, right? And so what you're talking about is pain here. That is a precursor always for grief.
Yeah, I think. Okay, all right. So with alcoholism and with addiction, if you're the person on the outside, from what I've experienced, I can only speak on that, and I'm sure others feel this way, but there becomes almost like this game that's being played between the person on the outside and the person who's actually struggling with the addiction and the alcoholism. And when I say game, I say this because I'll use my dad for an example. My dad was in and out of rehab 4 or 5 times between the ages I was 10 and 14. So he went to Massachusetts, was the first time he did it, like an inpatient rehab. He went to Florida, he went to Texas. Like, he was going to all of like the best rehab centers possible. And as a kid, when you know he's going to get better, like he's trying to get better, like that's all I wanted. That's
Right.
This is amazing. This is great. Let's go. I'm
Right.
feeling hopeful. I'm feeling excited. I'm like, I'm gonna have my dad.
Right.
And he comes back and he's like, and he tells me this, that he's like, this is different. Like,
Right.
this time's different. Like I'm good. I'm good. And
Right.
he genuinely, I think, wanted me to believe that. And I think he wanted to believe that himself.
Right.
But then he falls back down. And then that happens again. That cycle happens again. And then that cycle happens again. And then that cycle happens again. As that kid, you start to see that words don't mean anything. You start to believe that because, well, you told me this. You told me you were going to do this, but you didn't. Now, of
Right.
course, at that time, you're lacking understanding, you're lacking perspective, you don't understand the difficulties
Right.
of this issue, of this problem, of this disease. But that's how I felt. There was this huge moment where I was like, I really began to close off myself to others,
Mm-hmm.
to trusting what they were saying. And I'm going to overanalyze everything you say because if your actions don't meet your words, I can't trust you.
Yes, exactly. Because the most important person in your life, the one who has no motivation, right, to lie to you,
Mm.
is why would you take the word of a acquaintance or stranger or even a close friend?
It just didn't make sense to me.
Mm,
But this is the interesting thing is every single time I believed him again.
mm-hmm.
And every single time I was disappointed. And the same thing happened with my mom as well. I think I was older at that time, so maybe not the same thing. There was a bit of detachment that I was able to have with that and understand
Yeah.
that her saying this hasn't been proven. So I want to believe you and I'm gonna support you as much as I can, but I'm not gonna like fully put myself in that position to be
Yeah.
hurt again.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I know that when I look back at this, what's so interesting to me is even though I was feeling all of that pain and experiencing all of that pain through my parents' kind of addiction and struggles, and this showed up in different ways, whether it was me trying to goof off in class or be that kind of clown, right? Which teachers I know didn't appreciate.
Oh, God
um,
bless teachers.
yes, God bless them is right. And I had some amazing ones. And that's kind of what I was going to get to is no matter what I did, there was always somebody there
Hmm.
on the outside. Like strangers always showed me that like kindness and love, which was,
Interesting.
which looking back to me now, I see that as God. At
Interesting.
that time, though, I didn't. Like, for example, my my dad passed away when I was 14 years old, and I was at football camp when it happened.
Oh, wow.
I was there for one day. We usually stayed there 3 or 4 days.
Uh-huh.
So I was there for one night. I was woken up earlier than the rest of the kids. The coach came in, tapped me on the shoulder, said, "Payton, I gotta have a conversation with you." And that was like, what's going on? Is this
Right.
good? Is this bad? What's
Right. Right.
So I remember walking out of the cabin. So the cabins were set up like this along the lake, and
Uh-huh.
then towards the end of the lake there was a fire pit, and all the coaches were standing around the fire.
When he brought you
As
out?
so one of the coach walks me over to these coaches,
Oh
and
my
then as
gosh.
soon as I turn the corner, I see right next to the coaches is my mom and my sister.
Oh.
my heart's sinking. I'm like, what is this about? Why are you here? I don't want to see you right now.
Right,
I'm
right,
trying to play football. Like, this is my
right.
love. This is my passion. This is what I want
Exactly.
to do.
Yeah.
And I just remember, like, the first word she spoke, I just dropped to my knees. Like,
Oh,
I knew my dad was he was in a bad place, and it wasn't going well for him. And then that was the first experience with death
yeah.
that I had ever had. And it was with a guy that I considered, even though I felt like he was causing me so much pain in my life, I still saw him as this like undeniable presence, like this superhero almost. Like,
Of course.
he was like, I admired his discipline, his strength, and those
Right,
qualities of him. And I wanted that in myself as well.
right.
And now he's gone. All I could think at that time was, why me? Like the classic, why me? Why is this happening to me? What did I do to deserve this?
Mm,
Really, God? Like, I would stay
mm.
up in the middle of the night having these conversations with God. I remember this. Like, at the time we were living, it was me, my mom, my grandmother, and my brother living in my grandmother's trailer. And we had, it was kind of on a rotation. There was 2 bedrooms, an office, and then there was a couch. So my brother and I would kind of switch off from the couch to the office to the bed. And in the office, there was this bean bag. And I remember I slept on that bean bag a lot. I liked it for some reason. It's comfortable.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
And I remember in the middle of those nights, I would just stay up and just like, what made, like, I thought things were going good. I thought things were kind of looking up. I thought like this maybe could have been something
Right. He was
different,
gonna
new.
conquer this, yeah.
And that was like my first experience with truly discrediting God. Like,
Mm,
there's no way you would
mhm.
ever do something like this to somebody. Because I
Yeah,
finally was experiencing what other people I think were feeling, which
right,
was that like despair and
right.
pain
Yeah.
and grief.
You can't be good, you can't care,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. Yeah. Like, really? I'm 14 years old and this is what you're doing to me? Like,
Right.
and you don't think about the other people who have experienced these pains. It's me. It's all about
Exactly.
me.
Of course. That's totally normal.
So, my sophomore year is when the grief really hit. My freshman year,
Mm,
I was like, I'm not even going to think about this. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to do my thing. I played football. I went to school. It was whatever. Second year, that was, I didn't go to football camp that year.
mm,
Like, I barely made it to the football field. Because I had such a great community in that football team, I played.
mhm.
If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have. Quit basketball in the middle of the season. And once I quit basketball, that led to this like spiraling where I was staying home from school constantly.
Mm.
Wouldn't go to school. My mom would try to get me to go to school. And she's this single mom trying to take care of 2 kids and a grandmother or her mom. And she's working 60 hours a week, driving to Boston, coming back, trying to make meals for us, like doing all of this stuff. And
And putting it in perspective, Boston's what, an hour and a half from you?
yeah, yeah,
Right.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that's
So
definitely
she's driving an
important.
hour and a half to work, an
I'm
hour and a half back, grieving her husband.
grieving her love of her life, like
Yeah.
all of these different things. And then on top of that, I'm
And you're all
struggling with my
grieving.
own
Yeah.
pains. My brother's
Yeah.
struggling with his own pains. He was kind of doing his own thing as well. I won't talk about that, but
Right.
that's his story to share. But for me, it was like, I'm not going to go to school. Like, this doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't,
Right.
like, I'm not going to do any of this stuff. So why even pay attention to it? So we ended up, because I wasn't going to school and the school was concerned, we ended up making a plan where I would just be homeschooled instead, or like kind of be homeschooled. So I was just kind of staying at home, not interacting with anybody.
Mm.
I was playing a lot of video games, just kind of like that
Tuning
was
out. Yeah.
tuning out, exactly. And so that was probably one of the more depressing states I've ever been in. It was like
Sounds like it.
it was honestly just because my mom had so much love for me. I felt like I was in this opportunity where I could just like kind of take advantage of that a little bit, and like this could
Mm.
be my life, whatever. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like I can't do anything. Whatever. This is what it's gonna be. I'll play video games all day. Who cares? And my friends would show up and they try to get me to come out and play. Like these guys that I had around me were so, and they are so important, and they were so vital to me
Wow.
coming out of this.
And
Like
these
this,
were your peers. These were young
yeah,
men your
yeah,
age.
yeah.
That's pretty remarkable, the amount of insight and compassion that
They are
they were
incredible human
demonstrating.
beings.
Wow.
um,
Wow.
yeah, we all have very kind of similar stories, like,
Mm.
which is so interesting. Um, Experience with loss, early ages, um, like 4 or 5 of us in that same kind of category. And then the other, I'd say there's a good amount of us guys that have kind of really stuck together. And the other guys have just like were raised by amazing parents and amazing people, and they've become amazing people themselves who care and have empathy for people. And just I felt at the time I didn't feel blessed. At the time I was very annoyed with them. I was like, get out of
Yeah,
my
yeah.
life, like go away.
Right, right.
I don't want anything to do with you. Like this is what I'm gonna do. But like looking back, it's powerful to have those type of people, and this is where it gets so interesting to me. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. I feel like I've been rambling on for on and on and on.
Well, one thing that I wanted to ask you about is, do you have any insight into how you and this group of friends came to be so vulnerable with each other? Because that seems to me, I mean, it's really remarkable. Uh, You know, teenagers can be very self-focused, right? And I don't think they're universally that way. I think teenagers sometimes get a lot of criticism that they don't deserve.
Mm, mm.
But for young people that age, why do you? How is it? Do you think that you guys that they formed that kind of bond with you, that they would pursue you even when you were rebuffing them?
It's an interesting question. There's a lot that comes to my mind, and I'm not sure if this is even the correct answer. I'm not sure what the right answer is. I think when I think about these guys and why we were able to kind of lean on each other, support each other in those moments, I think a lot of it has to do with we built a bond from it's started, at least the people that I'm thinking of initially started from football.
Mm.
And in football, there's a lot of ups and downs. You you have to, especially with the coach that we had. Our coach was a really, I'm speaking more high school here because that's when this was happening. Our high school coach was really a leader, in the essence of the word, like able to bring people together
Mm-hmm.
and help us understand what it's going to take to get where we want to go. And it's not going to be something that's individualistic. It's not going to be a solo thing. It's going to be, you guys have to come together. There is no
Right.
other option. Like, there are going to be battles that you're going to lose. How are
Mm-hmm.
you going to bounce back from those battles? And very often it's, we got to pick each other up.
Right.
So I think football had a lot to do with that bond itself. Stemming
I love
outside of
that.
that, like the people around me also, we've just kind of always been fortunate to have really good people around us. And I don't know why, maybe, I don't know. Yeah, because it's interesting. What have you seen with like your own experiences from the vulnerability of men? Because I don't think we were necessarily vulnerable with each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's been more of a recent thing.
Mm-hmm.
But we like knew we were struggling, and when we had to pick each other up, it wasn't a spoken
Right.
thing.
Right.
It was like a no, like a knowing.
Well, and maybe that's the important point there, right? Is that um, all people at times are vulnerable in their lives, and it's really natural for girls and women to verbalize that. They talk
Mm,
about it, and then it brings
mm.
them close together because they say, "Oh, really? I was feeling that way too. I thought I was the only one," you know. Um,
Right, right.
and knowing that you share something in common can really bring especially two girls or two women together in a bond. But I can
Absolutely.
see, yeah, but I can see where an objective, right? This objective that we're
Mm,
working together, we're striving together for.
mm.
Yeah, you don't, for boys and men, maybe you don't need to say it because you are literally doing it, you're experiencing it, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think there's two sides to it. I think it's like maybe not even two sides. Maybe there's that gray area where both are so important for
Yes,
men and women alike. Like,
yes,
I felt connected to my friends then, but not how I feel connected to them now.
right. Now
Like
you're
what you
learning
what
to
you
use
just
your words.
mentioned with like how the girls like,
Yeah,
sometimes I feel like that now with my guys, and I'm
right,
like, this is
right.
a weird thing, but I
But
love it.
it's a good thing, right? It's a good,
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely. Like
yeah.
just the other day, about 8 of us got together, and my friend's family rented out a lake house for a couple days, and we all went there for the night. And while some of them were out kayaking, adventuring around, and they had a blast, me and 2 of my brothers, or best friends, whatever you
Mhm,
want to call them,
mhm.
sat around for 3 hours, literally talking about things like this,
Yeah.
like just being open with each other about our own experiences. Henry and Matt, if you're seeing this, hello.
We love you, Henry and Matt.
Absolutely.
Well, and that's really special, and I'm sure there was a point where you guys were kind of, you had talked and it was and you felt close to each other, and then you got up and, had a root beer or whatever, or, you know, said, "Hey, let's play pool," or whatever it is that you guys do for
Yeah,
fun.
well, I think the talks were just like, you know how I mentioned that I felt closed off. Like
Yeah.
I kind of like shut my voice down. I really became somebody who I would listen. I was always going to listen to you, and I was always going to just kind of be there, but I wasn't going to open up or connect or do anything like that. That wasn't what I was going to do. And I think a lot of it was maybe just this, maybe fear of opening up and what that looks like, but also just scared and what that would mean for a relationship.
Hmm.
So I never did that. I never opened up. I think I honestly, I'd like to ask my friends this. and see what they think
Right,
about
right.
it.
See what their
See what they
impressions.
think about this. But like from my own perspective, it always seemed like they were opening up to me in different areas.
So this is interesting because it sounds to me like you're saying you became an excellent listener, which
Mm,
was probably a great trait in a friend.
mm,
But until you became an excellent listener who also
mm,
shared,
mm.
the relationship could only have been so deep, right?
Right, absolutely. It's interesting because I never really felt connected to anybody.
Interesting.
I was very closed off in that regard.
And yet they were probably
Like
feeling very connected to you
oh,
as they should.
like if people would send me like people, I always noticed that people would reach out to me to hang out, but I would
Mhm.
never reach out to anybody. Never. I was always on the receiving end of like the hangout conversations, and I don't say that like it's a good thing. Like that's not a good
Right.
thing. That's just how it was. I was so I think that was like, and if people send me text messages or DMs and they were like funny, I would like, why don't I do that? Why don't I ever? Why don't I ever send a message to somebody to hang out with them, or why don't I ever send something that reminds me of them? Because like, why don't I do that?
But you go back to that 8, 9, 10-year-old boy who learned to close off,
Mm,
right? So it's that's it's just simply sounds like a part of your progression, right?
mm.
And honestly part of your grief journey, seems to me, right?
Absolutely. I think grief is what opened me up to this.
Ah,
I mean, grief and um, grief and romantic relationships definitely both. I'd say romantic relationships was like the spark to it, but grief was like the flame, was the bonfire. That was like the thing that really set it in motion.
okay, explain that.
Well, one of the biggest issues is a relation a relationship. You gotta connect with each other. You gotta. There's two sides to it. You gotta share. You gotta be open. You gotta be vulnerable. And I wasn't capable of doing that. So I thought that wasn't
Right.
accept me for who I am. I don't do that. So why are
Mhm.
we trying to make something that I'm not? Like let's not. No need to do that.
Why do you keep trying to get in my head? Aren't I
Right,
good to you?
right. Exactly. And the woman that I'm speaking with, amazing. Like she was had such a her and her family had such a significant impact in my own life. They kind of took me in. I lived with them for a little bit, and like they were very impactful in my journey.
Now, is this before or after your mother passed away?
This is before. It was after. Yeah, so it was after my dad. It was around like it was like 3 or 4 years after my dad, and that was like the time where I was finally like getting better. I think she had a lot to do with that.
Mhm.
Like feeling good about doing homework and doing the great, like doing school and football and sports and being
Right.
involved with things, right?
And why weren't you living with your mother at this time?
I was very, very angry with her because I saw her going down the same route that my dad just went down and her not doing even as much as my dad did, which to me was like, so it's inevitable that this is going to happen again.
Right. And you didn't want to be there to watch the train wreck in slow motion.
Right. Yeah. I was trying to, my solution was to get away and not actually like, I think that can be a solution to the problem, but I also think there's something that was deeper to it in me not wanting to really face that and confront my mom with that reality.
Yeah.
So lived with them for a little bit, and once that relationship ended, I had to really take a look at myself because ever since a young kid. I always knew I wanted to have a healthy relationship that wasn't like my parents. I always knew, but there are fireworks going off right now. So. I always knew that I wanted to have kids and be a father that my dad was like, but also be more than that.
Right, right,
And the person I wasn't that.
right.
Wasn't even close to that. So I had to start looking at myself in the mirror, and that's what led me going down to therapy. And
Mm.
once I got to therapy, it was really taking a deep look into like what was going on. And the problem that brought me there was emotional intelligence, or was being aware of emotions. When I first went into therapy, I remember the first thing that I brought up to my therapist, Fran, who was amazing. She was a wonderful woman who genuinely I have so much love for, and I'm so grateful. One of the first things I said was, Fran, I don't feel. I don't have
Mm.
emotions. That like there's just nothing. It's empty. I'm
Like a
broken. I don't
robot.
know what's going on.
Wow.
And that was like a long process. I went to the public library. I checked out uh, books on emotions for my nephews.
Okay, nobody can see this, but you just did air quotes. Okay, so your nephews
Right.
were interested in some books on emotions. Got it.
And exactly. They were begging me for them. And that was really like the start of me trying to unpack and unravel what was going on inside. And that was a grueling process, and it was not fun, and it was very difficult. Well worth it, very meaningful, because now I can have this conversation with you,
Mhm.
whereas a couple years ago this would have never been in the picture.
Well, but I see this thread though going back to, the discipline you learned from your dad, the discipline that you have developed in yourself. I can see a lot of, I admire that in your quest to understand yourself,
Mm.
you took action. You went and learned, right? This is an aspect of grief because I'm not a psychologist, but in my opinion, you've been dealing with grief your whole life, right? And and one aspect of dealing well with grief is to find tools,
Mm.
right? And that takes a little initiative.
Mm.
You don't have to know what to do, but make
Mm.
these you can take initiative to find some help.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'd be interested to hear what you think some of the best tools are for grief specifically.
Well, I think you've already mentioned them. I'm a huge uh, supporter of grief counseling,
Mm.
trauma therapy.
Mm.
You know, at the right time, books can be really, really helpful. And right after my husband passed away, I remember him telling me after his wife passed away
Mm.
that he didn't want to read really fluffy, faith-filled, happy books about grief
Mm.
because his emotions and thoughts and feelings were way too raw, right?
Went
Too
there.
too much pain. And one book that he really liked was C.S. Lewis, A Grief Observed. And yeah, and that's one that I read
Yep.
right after he passed away. And the reason that I think that book is has helped a lot of people is because it's basically his journal. It's his own writings
Mm.
after, around the process of losing his wife to cancer and then his
Wow.
feeling. Yeah. And so, it's not this polished sermon
Right.
about hope in, um, better things, hope in God, faith, faith in resurrection, those kind of things. It's very much about all these things he's feeling, even his anger at God, you
Mm,
know? And
mm,
yet through the process of him exploring all of his thoughts and feelings, he eventually does return back to his faith in God,
mm,
right? And he so he shares that message, but it's a message shared with all it's the contrast. I mean, one thing that you had said, you had talked about the light in this darkness.
mm, mm,
That
mm.
I think if you don't recognize or see the darkness, how can you even appreciate the brightness of the light? And yet, there's a timing there to when you can really appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'd be interested to read that book because it sounds like something that is raw. It's real. It's
Mm-hmm.
and when it's your journals, it's almost like I don't know. I've never read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, but apparently that's one of the more profound books because he wrote that book with the intention for it to never be shared. It was his own journaling,
Right.
which is why I
Right.
think it has such a huge impact on the world today. But
Right.
like, and I this is not my own thoughts. This is somebody that I kind of was listening to speak on this, and I think that relates to what you're saying, where it's like a journal through grief is such an up and down process, right? And that there are so many moments where it does kind of feel like, what in the world is this? Like, what is going on? Like, I don't even know how to function properly. So
Right.
many days where I did literally multiple days in a row after my dad passed away where I didn't leave my cushion, my bean bag. Like I didn't
Right.
there was no thought to it. There was no reason for me like that there was all I could focus on, all I could try to grasp was like just surviving, breathing, right? That was like the bare minimum of it.
Right.
And those moments are important. Those moments are necessary. I think you you asked me a question on the doc that you sent me,
Mm-hmm.
and I believe it was like, how could you support somebody who's going through grief?
Yeah.
And I think my friend Matt demonstrates this beautifully.
Okay. Share that with me.
The night of that my ma passed away, I called a few of my friends, and Matt has always been very empathetic. Just like he feels your pain. And when I called him and I told him this news, he started crying before I did.
Wow.
And to me, I'm not saying cry for like that. That's not the point of it. But to me, it was
Right.
like I knew he cared. I knew he was there. I
Right.
knew he was
Right.
present. And I asked him while we were sitting on the dock the other day at the lake house because he was one of the people that I was talking to with Henry. And I asked him what kind of like how does he, since he hasn't experienced grief, like he's kind of the one, not the one friend, but one of our friends who hasn't really experienced grief, but he's kind of that guy who is like the best at handling it in some ways with
Yeah.
somebody else. Like you can tell he's there and he cares, and he pretty much just said like, I don't try to understand what you're going through. I'm not gonna say like like yeah, I know I couldn't understand what you're going through right now because I've never experienced that before. So I'm just gonna be there for you.
Right.
And I think when I was reflecting on this, I think so often when we're trying to support somebody who's grieving or in grief or in that kind of like muck or the pain of it, we want to find the perfect words to say.
Mm.
We want to like just like give them this like grasp of wisdom that'll like snap them out of it or change everything and they'll be good and it'll be like now they have perspective and it's going to be all so wonderful, right? But the thing is people in grief don't need sympathy. They don't need you to say I'm sorry for you. They don't need that. They need empathy. They need you to be there with them. They
Right.
need you to know that like I am present with you.
Right.
It's not about the words you say, it's about the presence you bring to them. I'm going to sit with you. And if that's all you want, okay. If you want to talk about your favorite memories of that person, I'm here. If you want to just speak about anything else, I'm here.
Mhm.
But the main thing is that I'm here.
Right. Right.
And I'm
I'm going to
not
sit
trying
there
to
with you.
force anything. I'm not trying to force you out of anything. I'm going to meet you where you're at. And maybe I have some experience with it, so maybe that helps me with it, and maybe I don't. But either way, I can be here because we all know what pain is, and pain isn't fun,
Right.
right?
You're so fortunate to have such a friend like that.
Beautiful man. Beautiful
Yeah.
man.
Sounds like it. So let's shift gears for a second because again, like I said at the beginning, I met you at after this church service,
Mm,
and tell me about the role that faith has played
mm, mm.
in your grief journey, and just share that.
Please, I'd love to. It was the one thing I was missing.
Mm.
I had built all of these habits up from working out, meditating, journaling, reading, like
Therapy.
therapy, right? And I remember I had a conversation with my sister one day, and I was kind of like just opening up and saying, like, I'm doing all these things, and still it doesn't feel like enough. Like, I'm eating right, I'm working out, I'm meditating, I'm journaling, and I'm doing all these great things. And of course, they were benefiting me significantly. They had great effects on me.
Of course.
But it was still, there was still something that was missing there. And, to be honest with you, faith wasn't real. Like, I think I always just, how do I word this? I don't know if I had hope or I think I just like kind of just moved through it when my dad passed away. There wasn't a whole lot of faith. I'll say that. There wasn't a whole, there was definitely no really relationship with God. And I'm sure maybe others could relate, but it was like I would
Maybe a
ask God.
distant idea, but
Right, absolutely. It was like God wasn't showing me He was there for me, so
right,
I'm gonna distance myself. And I'm
right.
very grateful that was the timing because I feel like it's all led to this today. And when I started to bring it back to the conversation I had with my sister, when I started to realize that there was something missing, that opened myself up to something more, and I started to look for more. And I was looking for more in a lot of the activities I was doing. I was trying MMA and I was trying piano and I was trying painting and I was trying creating, like all these different things I was looking for. And they were all great experiences. They were all great, what's the word there? Not hobbies, right? They were
Mhm.
all great hobbies to try. But eventually, like I genuinely hit a point where I felt like I was going back down a place I didn't want to go back down.
Mhm.
I got sick, and it wasn't like a crazy sickness. It was like it wasn't COVID, but it was a sinus infection, and I had to miss a
Mm,
couple weeks. Not a sinus, it was something. And I
yeah.
had to miss a couple weeks from work. And at this time, my mom had already passed away, and I was doing a lot of thinking, a lot of thinking, a lot of analyzing, a lot of just like trying to figure out trying to grasp my head around everything. After losing both my parents and also recognizing that I do have amazing people around me, but still feeling like sometimes empty and like just losing hope
It's
that I
normal.
wouldn't
Yeah.
find what I needed or what I was
Right.
meant to be doing or
You were
whatever
developing all of these aspects of of a healthy life, but the spiritual component was missing.
it was missing. And that led me to one day. I guess I should probably back up. I did try going to church. I went with my sister. My sister invited me to come with her because she had been going to church for a
Hmm.
while with her mom. And I went to church and kind of mocked it
Hmm.
when I first went. Like, genuinely, I did. Like, people were singing hymns and I was laughing.
Uh, yeah.
Not not the proudest moment, but
No, but it makes sense. If you've never walked in a church before, it would probably look a little cultish and a little weird. You know?
I definitely can attest to that. That's how it kind of felt, and I was just like trying to look around and like
Right,
see
right.
what should I do here, and I wasn't open to the experience. So I wasn't open to receiving it. It was just kind of like, hey, I'll go. We'll see, whatever. But that was like the start. That was the start of something. You know, I was still curious. I was still being myself. I was asking people around why they were going here. I was still looking. And after I stopped going, I still had a Bible because I bought the Bible for the church and stuff like that. But there was this one night where I had gone through the whole day of just in my head, overthinking everything and not being able to find comfort, solace, peace, joy, anything. It was just like this constant anxiety, this constant depression, this constant like emptiness that I was feeling. And I was just like, I don't know. I can't do anything. Like I am at a loss. I
Right,
feel like I've tried so many different things. Like
right.
I'm reading all these books, all these self-help books, and I've been doing therapy, doing all these things. And I walked into my laundry room, which was right next to my bathroom, and I bowed down and I said, God, take over. I'm done. Genuinely, like, I don't know what to do. Whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. Whoever you want me to be, I'll be it. Like, just take over. Let me not feel this way anymore. Please.
Right.
Let me be the person that I want to be and that you want me to be. And I ended that with just like, let me know what I have to do. And as soon as I walked out of my bedroom, I noticed that there was one lamp on and everywhere else was dark in the room, but this lamp was on. And I didn't remember it going in, but I see this lamp and it's pointing directly at a Bible. And yeah, yeah,
Cue the angelic voices. He's
exactly.
like, God, I cannot make this more clear.
And that to me was just like this comfort rolled over, and I was just, wow, that's what I got to do. I got to read your word. I got to start taking this, like I've disciplined myself everywhere else in my life. Now I got to start disciplining myself with you. And that's began the journey to where we are now, and still struggle with it. I struggle with trusting God. I still struggle with trusting myself and trusting others, even. But I'll tell you one thing: it makes it easier.
Hmm.
I feel like my life has, since that day, has gone in directions that I never expected it to go. Even this conversation right here and meeting you, how we met, that just, to me, it was just, that was something I prayed for. I prayed to meet people, be with people who are spiritual, who are aligned with their faith,
Mhm.
and that's happened. And it's, I don't know, it's I'm trying not to preach or say what somebody needs to do, but just share my experience. And all I can say is God has blessed me with the ability to kind of see it for what it is, in some sense. Like, no longer seeing my mom as this person that I can blame, no longer seeing my mom as um, just this victim and this problem, but like seeing that she was struggling, seeing that she
Mhm.
was handling so much. She had so much on her plate, and she was still trying to be there for me. She was still trying to help me. She was always had the most belief in me, and I denied a lot of the love she was trying to give me. And that's led me to just wanting to give love to others and accept love, and I don't think any of that would have ever come to fruition, if I hadn't bowed down and accepted God and just given my life to him.
I love that, and I am so grateful that you shared that because it brings us full circle back to the beginning of the conversation when you were talking about your parents. The first thing you went to was the things you loved about them, the ways you could see them as caring, valuable, genuine human beings and not just as addicts
Mm,
or, victims of whatever pain or trauma they had had. And that's that's the gift I think that God gives us to see others through those kind of eyes.
mm,
And it's amazing because not only is it healing for ourselves, but it actually it strengthens those relationships, which then creates so much more meaning in our lives.
absolutely, absolutely. It extends from you. That's
Mhm.
one of the most interesting things about it is
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's not something that you're just seeking and trying to bring into yourself. Yeah, you become a conduit for something greater. And
absolutely, and
yeah.
it's like the love that I get from God
Mm.
and from trying to live a life more like God, like Jesus, which of
Mhm.
course I will never be able to do
Right,
completely, but like
right.
trying to aim for that.
Exactly. Trying to walk those footsteps.
The more and more I realize, like, that it's flowing to others, and like I
Yes.
want to give that to others, and I want
Yes.
to have them feel what I feel and receive what I'm receiving, and like,
Yes.
trust me when I say I'm not like I'm great at it all the time. Like, I try my absolute best, but um it's a really interesting experience noticing not only that you're giving to more people, but also noticing that others seem to notice you
Yeah.
in a different way,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is interesting.
You have a light about you. You really do. And uh, and I saw that, and I really, really appreciate you sharing all of this. And let's just finish with the question that I at, end with on all of my interviews is, what do you think it means to grieve well?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you again, Julie. Thank you for giving me this space and being able to reflect back and bounce back what I'm saying, so that I can hear it. Sometimes I'm not really sure what I'm saying. um, you definitely have like a very calming and soft presence, and I can feel that even through the phone, which I definitely appreciate.
I'm
Uh,
glad you feel that way. I'm glad. Well, you've never seen me on a vacation, or in traffic, or other places that I lose my marbles. But
we'll keep it here then.
that's right. No, I
um,
appreciate your kind words.
yeah. To answer your question, what do I think it means to grieve well? I'll start off with what my buddy Henry said to me the other day, is that there is no right or wrong to grieving. We're going to do the best we can with what we have. Um, I will say, in my own experience, I've experienced two different versions of grief. Um, One that was very painful. One was, and one that was more, of course, painful, but also there was still comfort and joy in that pain. And I think actually one of the big reasons for that was a book that I read, called, it's not the 5 stages of grief, but it's the 6 stages of grief. Same author. I forget what's his name.
Elizabeth Kubler-Ross.
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah,
Yeah, her name. Yes.
yeah.
And in that book, there was a section talking about how somebody can see the same moment as the most traumatic event, or that same moment as a catalyst, as like a shifting moment in their life, as a moment to grow and learn. And that, I'm not saying takes away from the pain that you're experiencing or that you're feeling, but to grieve well, if we're going to go back to what that question is to have perspective that this is happening for you and not to you, which is something that I heard from, I believe, Mel Robbins. And I think that ties into this. It's, how can this benefit you? I'll explain how my mom's passing has benefited me. Losing her was one of the most difficult things that I've experienced. It's painful. There were months where I was just all over the place, as grief does to people.
Right.
One of the greatest gifts that's happened to me since then is I feel like I do take the opportunity to speak to the people around me and tell them how much I appreciate them for their traits, their amazing qualities, and be vulnerable with those around me if there's an opportunity for it, right? Whereas with her, I didn't do that. I wasn't appreciative of her. I didn't say thank you. I wasn't grateful for her in how I believe I should have been. And I don't say that to say that I regret what I did because it gave me this gift, but it's just looking at the reality of the situation.
Exactly.
So that was a gift, right? Now I can be open with those around me. Now we can share a connection, and
Right.
hopefully this flourishes into being something more. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And it's beautifully said. And all I can think about is how incredibly proud your mom and dad would be of you. You know,
Thank you.
they I am sure that when things started out, they just wanted all the best for you, and life and pain kind of got in the way, but what a way that you honor them by the way you're living your life.
Trying my best. But I appreciate that. It's hearing that still doesn't sit right. It doesn't. Um, that's definitely something that I struggle with, but I do appreciate it. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing everything. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
I've enjoyed our conversations, and I'm very excited to see where your life takes you over the next few years. So let's keep in touch.
Absolutely, Julie. I appreciate you so much, and we surely will.